Snow clung to the concrete outside the hospital, crushed into gray slush by hundreds of hurried shoes that never stopped long enough to notice it. The woman stood just beyond the automatic doors, shifting her weight from foot to foot, her breath coming out in thin white clouds. She pulled her coat tighter around her child, though it was too thin for this kind of cold, too worn to do much good. Her fingers trembled as she tucked stray strands of hair behind the girl's ear, pretending it was just another wait, just another few minutes. The child sat quietly beside her, small boots dangling above the frozen ground, toes barely brushing the edge of the bench. Her cheeks were flushed, not from warmth but from fighting it, and her lips were pressed together in an effort that cost her more strength than she had. She didn't complain. She didn't ask when they were going inside. She just stared at the glass doors of the hospital, watching them slide open and closed for strangers, every soft whoosh sounding like a promise meant for someone else. Inside the mother's chest, panic beat against her ribs like a trapped thing. She counted seconds, then breaths, then heartbeats, anything to keep her fear from spilling out and frightening her daughter. She told herself help was close, so close. She could smell disinfectant through the doors, but close wasn't the same as here. Her arm tightened protectively around the child, holding her upright, holding her together, holding back the dread that whispered they might have waited too long. A sleek black car rolled up to the curb, its tires cutting clean lines through the slush as if the cold and chaos didn't apply to it. The engine purred softly before going still, and for a moment everything around it seemed louder. The wind, the distant siren, the shuffle of anxious feet. The door opened, and the man stepped out with the ease of someone used to being on time, used to being expected. His suit was perfectly pressed, dark against the pale winter, his shoes untouched by snow as if the ground itself had made room for him. He glanced at the hospital sign, then at his watch, jaw tightening. His phone vibrated in his hand. Another reminder of a full schedule and waiting rooms, far more comfortable than this one. He was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Meetings, numbers, decisions, his body angled toward the entrance, his mind somewhere far warmer. The woman and child were just shapes in his peripheral vision. Another sad picture his eyes had learned to slide past without slowing. As he lifted the phone to his ear, he told himself not to look. Looking led to questions, and questions led to delays. He took a step forward, boots crunching sharply, heart steady, purpose clear. He didn't see the way the mother's shoulders stiffened as he passed, or how the child's gaze flickered toward him with quiet curiosity. He only felt the familiar pull of urgency, the comfort of walking away, unaware that one more step would change everything. The child swayed first, so subtly it almost looked like a stretch, her small body rocking as if the world had shifted beneath her. Her mother felt it through her arm, a sudden weight, heavier than it should have, been, and looked down just in time to see the color drain from the girl's face. There was no warning cry, no dramatic collapse, just a quiet giving way, knees folding as though they'd forgotten their purpose. The sound she made when she hit the ground was soft, but it tore through the air louder than any siren. Panic exploded in the mother's chest. She dropped instantly, scraping her palms on the cold concrete as she gathered the child against her, calling her name again and again. The girl's head lolled weakly, eyes fluttering, breath shallow and uneven. People passed. Shoes slowed, then kept moving. Someone glanced over, then looked away. The mother's voice cracked as she called for help, louder this time, fear ripping through every word. Her hands shook as she tried to warm the child's face, rubbing tiny arms that felt frighteningly limp beneath her fingers. Inside her, guilt crashed hard and merciless. She should have brought food. She should have come earlier. She should have known. The hospital doors were right. They're so close, but in that moment they felt impossibly far, like a promise that refused to hear her begging. The man stopped as if someone had grabbed him from behind. His foot hovered mid-step, phone still pressed to his ear, the voice on the other end fading into noise. Something sharp had cut through his focus. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling, sudden and unwelcome. He turned slowly, irritation already forming, ready to be annoyed at whatever had broken his momentum. Then he saw them. The child lay crumpled against the woman's chest, too still, her small body folded wrong, like a doll dropped by accident. The mother's face was pale and frantic, eyes wide with a fear so raw it punched straight through him. Her hands moved too fast, too desperate, brushing hair from the girl's face, pressing her cheek, whispering her name like it was the only thing holding the world together. The man's irritation collapsed into something heavier. His chest tightened, breath catching before he could stop it. He remembered, without warning, the sound of hospital monitors from years ago, the helplessness of waiting, the way time stretched when someone you loved wasn't moving. His phone slipped from his ear, forgotten, the voice still talking to no one. Around them, people hesitated, unsure, afraid to step in. The man took a step back toward them, then another, his pace slower now, grounded by the sight of the child's colorless lips and the violent tremor running through the mother's arms. In that moment, walking away felt impossible, like abandoning something fragile and human that had already been left alone for too long. He lowered himself onto the icy bench without thinking, the cold seeping instantly through the fabric of his suit. The decision felt strange, almost unreal, like stepping out of his own life and into someone else's crisis. He didn't ask permission. He didn't hesitate. He shrugged off his coat in one smooth motion and wrapped it around the child, careful but firm, tucking it close as if warmth alone could anchor her back to the world. The mother flinched at first, startled by his nearness, then froze as she realized he wasn't trying to take her child, only to help. Her eyes met his for a brief second, wide and searching, filled with fear and suspicion and a silent plea all at once. He held her gaze steadily, grounding her with his calm when her own was breaking. "Breathe," he said softly, the word carrying more authority than volume. "She's here. She's not alone." His hands moved with surprising gentleness as he checked the girl's pulse, counting silently, forcing himself to stay composed. Inside, his heart hammered, old memories rising like ghosts, but he locked them down. Panic wouldn't help. Control would. He pulled his phone back out, fingers precise now, voice sharp and clear as he called for immediate assistance, cutting through explanations and demands like he was used to doing in boardrooms and emergencies alike. The wind whipped harder, snow stinging their faces, but he leaned closer, shielding the child with his body. The mother clutched her daughter tighter, following his lead, breathing when he told her to, clinging to his steadiness like a lifeline. For the first time since stepping out of his car, he forgot entirely about the waiting building behind him and focused only on the fragile life wrapped in his coat. The response came fast, as if his voice had unlocked something the hospital had been holding back. The glass doors burst open, spilling warm light onto the frozen pavement. A nurse ran out first, coat half-zipped, eyes already scanning, followed by two doctors moving with practiced urgency. A stretcher rattled over the uneven ground, its wheels catching briefly on the slush before someone lifted it clear. "Low blood sugar," he said quickly, stepping aside but staying close, his voice steady despite the tightness in his chest. The mother barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to the sound of her child's breathing and the feel of her small body pressed against her. When the nurse reached for the girl, the mother's grip tightened in reflex, terror flashing across her face. It took a gentle touch and a calm promise to make her let go. They lifted the child onto the stretcher, blankets wrapping around her, oxygen mask settling over her nose. The girl stirred, a faint sound escaping her lips, and the mother gasped as if she'd been underwater too long. She stumbled forward as they rushed inside, nearly losing her balance until the man caught her elbow, steadying her without a word. Inside the hospital, everything moved too fast and not fast enough at the same time. Doors swung open, voices overlapped, shoes squeaked against polished floors. The man walked beside them until a nurse stopped him with a firm hand, redirecting him to the waiting area. He watched the stretcher disappear down the corridor, the mother's head bent close to her child, and felt an unfamiliar ache settle in his chest. Hope tangled tightly with fear, refusing to let go. The response came fast, as if his voice had unlocked something the hospital had been holding back. The glass doors burst open, spilling warm yellow light onto the frozen pavement and cutting through the gray of the storm. A nurse rushed out first, coat half-zipped, breath visible in the air, eyes already locked on the child. Two doctors followed, their movements quick and precise, pushing a stretcher that rattled as its wheels struggled against the slush. "Low blood sugar," he said immediately, stepping aside but staying close, his words clean and controlled, the way he spoke when every second mattered. The mother barely registered his voice. Her mind clung to the shallow rise and fall of her daughter's chest, to the frightening lightness of her small body in her arms. When the nurse reached out, The mother's grip tightened in pure instinct, fear flaring sharp and animal in her eyes. Letting go felt like losing her all over again. "It's okay," someone said softly. "We've got her." Hands guided the child gently onto the stretcher, warm blankets wrapping her, an oxygen mask settling over her face. The girl stirred faintly, lips parting, and the mother sucked in a broken breath, relief and terror colliding so hard her knees nearly gave out. They moved fast through the doors, heat rushing over them, the smell of antiseptic replacing cold air. The mother stumbled, overwhelmed by the sudden warmth and motion, and the man caught her elbow without thinking, steadying her, anchoring her for one brief second. Inside, the world blurred, voices overlapping, doors swinging open, footsteps echoing too loudly. Then the stretcher disappeared down a corridor, taking the child and the mother with it, leaving the man standing still, watching, his chest tight with a hope he hadn't expected to feel. Time slowed in the waiting area, stretching thin and heavy. The mother sat hunched on the edge of a plastic chair, hands locked together so tightly her fingers ached. Her coat lay forgotten on the floor. Every sound made her flinch, the distant beep of a machine, the murmur of voices behind closed doors, the squeak of a gurney rolling past. She stared at the hallway where her daughter had disappeared, afraid that looking away might make something terrible happen. The man stood a few steps back, unsure where to put himself now that there was nothing to do. His phone buzzed again in his hand, the screen lighting up with reminders of meetings he was missing, decisions only he could make. He turned it face down without answering. For the first time in years, waiting felt heavier than acting. There was no deal to close here, no problem he could fix with authority or money, only uncertainty. A doctor finally approached, her expression calm but serious, and the mother surged to her feet, breath caught in her throat. The man watched her face as the doctor spoke, saw fear twist into confusion, then break apart entirely. When the doctor nodded and said the words, "She's going to be fine," the mother collapsed against the wall, laughter and sobs tearing out of her at once, her body shaking with the release of everything she'd been holding back. The man let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Relief washed through him, quiet and powerful. He watched the mother wipe her tears with the back of her hand, watched her stand a little straighter, and understood something shift inside him. Some moments didn't need witnesses or recognition. They just needed someone who chose not to walk away. The man stepped back toward the entrance, the weight of his life slowly settling onto his shoulders again. Outside, his car still waited at the curb, engine humming softly, a reminder that the world he came from hadn't paused for any of this. He straightened his jacket, now lighter without the coat he'd given away, and for a moment hesitated, unsure why leaving felt harder than staying had ever been. Behind him, small footsteps padded across the floor. The child emerged from the hallway wrapped in a hospital blanket. Color returned to her cheeks, her mother holding her close as if afraid the floor might open beneath them. The girl's eyes found him instantly. She lifted her hand, weak but determined, and waved, a shy smile breaking through the exhaustion. Something tightened in his chest. He waved back slowly, the gesture feeling more important than any signature he'd write that day. In her small smile, he saw trust, simple, undeserved, and complete. The mother met his eyes next, gratitude filling the space words couldn't reach. She nodded a silent thank you, and he returned it, equally silent, equally sincere. He turned and walked out into the cold, the automatic doors sliding shut behind him. As he reached his car, the city moved on as it always did, loud and indifferent. But inside him, something had changed. The most important meeting of his day had not been inside a boardroom or behind a desk. It had been on a frozen bench, beside a mother and her child who reminded him why stopping mattered.